All right. Megan, thank you so much for hopping on today. Why don't we just start by you telling us a little bit about yourself?
Love this question. I feel like I'm it,
It's the hardest, easiest question ever.
yes, it definitely is. It's so wide. Which direction do I want to take it? So a little bit about me, emphasis on a little. Stop me if I'm talking too long. So I grew up in Houston, Texas, the sweatiest place because we have really high humidity. And I grew up in a family where all of my siblings are my very best friends, still to this day. There are four of us within 5 years. Bless my mom's heart, she's amazing. My dad has always been in the financial world and grew up around that world for a long time. He's always been an investor, or he was the CEO of a mutual fund company for a long time. And when I was at the end of high school, my dad decided he was going to be an entrepreneur. And I, honest to goodness, don't think I knew what an entrepreneur was. I still don't know if I even say that word right. You know, the really fancy people say like entrepreneur. I can't even do it. They say
Entrepreneur.
entrepreneur. Yeah, I'm like, I don't know. I just say it really fast so no one knows. Um, he decided that he was going to start his own business. And at the time, I was like, that's so cool. I didn't realize how big of a decision that was. But now as an adult, I'm like, oh my goodness, like you have four kids. That's a big decision. He started his own business. And that was kind of where I first got exposure to this idea of being creative in a business context. And so my senior year, I headed off to Texas A&M because I'm a brainwashed Aggie, and both of my parents were Aggies, and all of my siblings are Aggies. And believe it or not, they did not force us to take that route. This is a side note, but I actually was signed up, ready to go to Belmont University in their songwriting program. I was one of like 20 people in that program, and I was headed that way. I was going to be going to music school in Nashville, Tennessee. And last minute, I think it was like February, I pivoted and I was like, I'm going to go to Texas A&M. Hard left turn. So glad I did it, but just crazy that I ended up doing that.
Trading Broadway for Northgate.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's a hard left turn for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I went to Texas A&M, and when I got there, I've always kind of been the person that is like, okay, what's next? Now I'm going to run this thing. So when I got there, I immediately was like looking for things to kind of just be creative and to lead. And you can't really do that your freshman year. And so I was humbled. I took part in a lot of different organizations and I just learned a lot. I'm going to circle back to this later in my story. But then ended up in college getting to lead a ministry, actually a 501c3 called Impact Retreat. And I was responsible for leading this. It's like a 1,500 person summer retreat. And through that, I got exposure to like hiring, firing, recruiting, like managing a business, all these things, but I didn't even really know that's what I was doing. At the same time, that is when I met my husband, which was amazing. Now, did I go on a date with him and then reject him and then circle back 2 years later? Yes, I did, but story for another time. But that is kind of where I got my first taste of like, this is what it'd be like to build and scale something that I love and I'm passionate about. And I don't even think I realized I was doing that at the time, but I was like, wow, this is so much fun. I'm in my thrive zone. Give me a microphone all day long, put me on a stage. I am thriving. I loved it. And then when I graduated, right back to ground zero, right? You're like humbled.
Hmm.
You just got to take a job. Well, I got connected to an accelerator type. I think they call themselves a creative engine, but it's called Praxis. It's for faith-driven, or it's for redemptive entrepreneurship. I was kind of connected into that community in college. I just stayed in touch with some of their team members, and I interned with one of the companies in their accelerator called Will Reed. At the time, I think we would have said we were a tech sales recruiting company. And the founder was an Aggie, and she was not that much older than me. Her name is Paige. Paige to completely change my life. I interned with them between my junior and senior year. And then following my senior year, she offered me to join full time, and I did. And I will never forget, I showed up. It was June 20th. I was freshly out of Texas A&M, and that week there was about four people at the company. She worked in Houston. The rest of us worked in Dallas. She invited me to her parents' house in Dallas. And I was like, oh, this is intimate. Cool. And we sat down and she said, so I just want to let you know, uh, everyone else is actually going to be leaving the company, except for like me and you. And I think one other guy stayed for a little while too. But it wasn't malicious at all. It was just like truly timing things. Like one girl was getting married, one guy has taken on another venture or something like that. But at the end of that conversation, I was like a few weeks into this job. It was just me and the CEO, and then one other guy who was kind of on his way out as well. And I was like, oh, okay, great. And I'd been hired to be a marketing coordinator at this startup because I had chosen to do marketing because that's what you choose when you're not really sure what you want to do in the business world. And sorry, still in marketing. And I mean, for 6 months, it ended up being basically me and Paige trying to build this. And at the time, I didn't think like it was anything like crazy, but looking back, I'm like, wow, I don't know why I didn't think like this. Some red flags here, I guess, that everyone is gone, but it wasn't any red flags. It turned out to be one of the best experiences of my entire life. But I did everything in that company as a startup. I mean, you are coming from the world of startup too. You just have to do what comes to you. So I ordered us snacks on Amazon, but I also was on all of our sales calls. I went to an in-person. One of our first clients was Qualtrics right before they were like really becoming a big thing. And I had no idea who they were. And I remember I drove to the office with my CEO and I showed up. I'm like 21 years old. And I show up to this office and I didn't even realize we were doing like a sales pitch and a sales call. And I just smiled the whole time we were there. We closed it. I left. And then now looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh. We closed Qualtrics before they were bought by SAP. We also closed App Dynamics. We closed MongoDB. I did not do this. My CEO, Paige, she's amazing. She did this. But I got to be a part of all of that. Yeah. And through all of this, I'm like catching the entrepreneurial energy. I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is so much fun. I'm working crazy hours. Like, you wake up really early and you're like, okay, let's do this. And you stay up really late. And I'm like, this is addicting. I love it so much. Then I fast forward 5 years later and we're still doing that. We've scaled the business and now I've moved completely. I mean, at the beginning I was doing sales, recruiting, anything that I could get my hands on. But then at the end, I truly was doing the head of marketing and branding at the end of the business. And we had partnerships with some of the big VCs in the Bay Area. We were pretty focused now on doing seed stage go-to-market recruiting for Series A seed stage go-to-market recruiting for these companies, sales recruiting. So it was a really specific niche, but it is what worked for us. And I would say like that experience working at Will Reed was like foundational to who I am as a person today, but also why I love what I do in the entrepreneurial world. And Paige Robinson, my CEO, is like one of the biggest impacts on my life. She's incredible, amazing. I learned so much from her. And then I felt an urge to try something new at the end of 2020. And in the midst of all this, I got married in the middle of COVID. And honestly, that was the best day ever. I will advocate for a small wedding all day long. And I was just like, so many things were entering into my life that were changing my focus from being solely on career. And I had to like pause and be like, what am I chasing right now? What am I seeking after? And at the end of 2020, I was like, I think I just need a new path. Like I need to try something new. I talked to my CEO. I was like, I think it's time for me to leave. And she was like, I don't think so though. And I was like, but I think so. But she was amazing about it. And she like helped me think about other options. And she was like, but let me fight for you. And I was like, okay. But at the same time, I think it was probably for the best for everyone too. Because at this point, my energy had dwindled towards the end. And I got connected to Faith Driven Entrepreneur, that community, and I ended up joining as their first. Actually, I think they probably laugh about this, but they didn't have a marketing person, and I was like, you should have a marketing person, and it should be me. And I sent them a whole deck, and I was like, hire me. I think I'm the right fit.
That's a great pitch, right? Like identifying that and be like, hey, you guys have this gap, and I'm the one that's going to fill it. It's a great way to get hired.
Oh, I fully believe. Anytime I hear people like want a job and they're like, but I don't think it's going to work out. I'm like, it can work out. But my family always laughs at me too, because whenever I see people running like track, I'm like, just run faster. And they're like, that's not how it works. I'm like, you can win if you run faster. That's the answer. And they're like, No. But that's kind of how I view a lot of things. But yeah, so I ended up joining their team. And then this last summer, after getting that experience, building out their marketing and branding for FDE and FDI, and getting to do that for Will Reed, I was like, I think I could do this for like a lot of other people. And I think there's a sweet spot of where people either don't want to spend $150,000 on a marketing agency and they're not really ready to hire their first full-time marketing person, but they need like some support. And then I launched my business Brightly. So that was a really long-winded way to say how I got to where I am today. But yeah, all those experiences kind of like culminated into this like one moment where I was like, I think this is what I love to do. I love being creative and strategic. And if I can like form my own dream job and also be an entrepreneur, great, let's do it. So yeah.
No. One of the things that you said really early on that like really caught my attention was the fact that, kind of when your dad was moving into the entrepreneurial world and you realized that it was an opportunity to be creative and, figure out a way to, approach a solution or a problem. I think that the creative side of entrepreneurship sometimes gets dwindled by the just like, this is a business and you got to think businessy, but like you have to be creative in your approach. You have to, that's how new businesses are formed, right? It's a creative adaptation to the way something's done or a problem. So why don't you just talk a little bit about your creative approach when it comes to business? Because obviously it sounds like it started at a really young age.
Yeah, I mean, I think just being someone who has been creative musically my whole life and like artistically, I wouldn't have put myself in like the artsy category, to be honest, but I think I've always wanted to be creating something, like I'm a showman. I like love presentation and I want everything to be showy and fun and engaging. And so I think that energy translated into wanting to be an entrepreneur, because an entrepreneur is constantly creating. Like, even if it's not the most fun thing you're creating, you do have to be creative in just your strategic decisions. So like, I don't know, I'm working with a company right now and they're figuring out how to set up their payment for their SaaS subscription that they're building. They're like, do we want to do like a choose what you pay model for our early beta users? And like the creativity that goes into that is it's immense. Like, you need a lot of creativity. You can't just be like, okay, this is the way we're going. I think the best entrepreneurs are the ones that can throw around a lot of ideas and can still figure out which ones are the good ones and which ones are the bad ones, and then actually go for them too. I mean, obviously it takes a lot to be an entrepreneur, but to be able to like sift through which of these ideas are good or not. And I think that's also the perk of having a co-founder, someone to tell you that's a terrible idea.
100%. That's funny that you kind of talk about somebody going through some pricing strategy struggles, because that's something that we're on right now. I think that this is, I guess, the creative side of me. I think that an opportunity to win new business, to be different, is actually within the way you price your product. Yeah. Especially when you're going in to disrupt a old industry and they have a very set way of doing it. Coming in with like a completely revolutionary new payment process and pricing strategy is a great way to pull people away and bring them in. But also at the same time, like, I don't know what that looks like. So like, that's what I like stare at the ceiling at night and think about, because I'm like, how can I price something differently? And like, so like, I love that. And it makes me feel better that other people are thinking of that too.
Well, that's one of the, I think it used to be the 4 P's of marketing, but I think there's like 7 P's now that they teach at school. But that's one of them, price, because it's truly marketing. Like pricing your product or your service is a big part of marketing. It's how you're going to get your name out to the world.
And it can stop somebody from even looking into your product. Like, also, like, even from a marketing standpoint, like, we were thinking about the way we display pricing. Like, we don't want to show it because for one of our products, it's a really big number. And like, we don't necessarily want people to just see that on the internet and be like, no, that's not what I want to do. But like, they need to know the pricing because it's important. So like, how do you creatively display that? Like, it's hard.
It's so hard to know when to start talking about pricing, but sometimes it's also like a tool in your tool belt to like reject customers that aren't a fit. So like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you might be like, well, this is my price. My husband's in sales too, and every once in a while, like hear something like that from him. Not about pricing, but an early ripcord is what we called it when I was in sales recruiting. If you can like find a way to like help the customer disqualify themselves early on, then that's like a really good way to obviously like use your time efficiently. And pricing is a really good way to do that, because there's a lot of times where people aren't in your market and it's just not a good fit, which is hard to learn early on as an entrepreneur, because you're kind of just wanting to say yes to like everything. You're like, yes, I can absolutely help you, because you don't want people to think you're incompetent, and you also just want to have wins under your belt.
Yep.
But sometimes it's just not a good strategy. So
No, I feel that on a deep level. The other thing that you kind of touched on a little bit that I thought was interesting is a lot of your early experience came from you working with a nonprofit, right? What was the name of the Impact? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So I think nonprofits are a very unique thing to think about, because everybody just thinks, like, nobody really thinks of them as businesses sometimes, but in reality, they are full-fledged businesses. They take a creative mind. You have to run them efficiently, and they have to be a well-run business in order to survive. Especially when you're working off donations, and people are paying it. Like, you have to manage the money efficiently. You have to figure out ways for it to generate revenue to keep it alive. Like, talk a little bit about your experience with that, because I think that that's a unique perspective in the world of entrepreneurship.
That's something I don't see myself operating in a nonprofit hardly ever. And maybe that's just narrow-minded of me now. My last job, Faith Driven Entrepreneur, that was a nonprofit, actually. It's a 501c3. And I got my start in nonprofit, so I don't know why. In my head, I don't think of myself as a nonprofit person. But I will say, like, that space a lot of times is, I don't know what it is, but it's harder to run it like a business. And I think there's a lot of different things that go into that. And I never want to disparage a nonprofit. Obviously,
why is it hard?
I think you attract a different kind of talent. So the person that is hungry, staying up till 3 a.m., you're not going to often find that person at a nonprofit. That's not always true. I'm not trying to generalize it, but like, those people are competitive. They're motivated by money. They're money motivated. You find them in sales and entrepreneurship a lot of times. In nonprofits, you don't get paid a lot of money. Like, most of the time, you don't make a lot of money. And sometimes that's a really good thing, because you have a little bit more of a life outside of your job. But at the same time, like, the motivation to do things faster or more efficiently is less. That's not always the case, but it can be the case. Now, what was different about my experience when I was at A&M is we were a bunch of college students. So one, you don't, like, what even is your schedule in college? I don't even know what I did in college. It's truly fascinating to think that I just like bopped around at like 2 p.m. during the day. But you are hungry just to be alive. So I was motivated to like run a really efficient organization. I also had a team of other people that were really, really motivated as well. And so we were constantly trying to innovate and make things better. And yeah, we had a limited budget, but you're scrappy when you're in college too. So it was like a perfect storm of, yeah, we were a nonprofit, but we were scrappy to figure stuff out. I mean, like, I am the person that emails brands all the time. This is probably horrible because I'm in marketing, but I email brands all the time and I'm like, hey, like, what are the chances you could send me a gift card or something? Just because, like, I do this all the time. I wrote a poem to Tiff Streets one year because I wanted to win this contest. And now we're like friends. I'm like really good friends with their brand. And this is young me. I'm just hungry for like to get things done and to do things. So when you're in college and you have a nonprofit, it works. But the second that you take it out of that, you run at a little bit of a different pace than someone who's trying to scrape for revenue every month, you know? Once again, I don't want to talk bad about nonprofits. I hope that's clear. I think it's just it's just different. What your end goal is different.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that, you know, to some entrepreneurs is a unique challenge that maybe excites them if there's a cause that they're passionate about and they can use their expertise on the scraping for revenue side of the business world and then kind of use it for good. You know, I like that transition and not everybody does it and it's hard to do, but when it's done well, it's clean water. If you've ever heard his story. He wrote a book called Thirst, and it is an incredible. I'm blanking on his name, but it's an incredible book about how he kind of turned his club promoter lifestyle that he lived in New York City to now providing clean water for as many people as he can, and took all of his like scrappy entrepreneurial skills and turned it into a like the first subscription based nonprofit donation
Oh, that's awesome.
fund. Yeah, it's a great story. So I
I
highly
wish
recommend
people
that.
do that. Like that is really cool. And a lot of people are doing that. I don't think I do.
Scott Harrison is his name. Sorry, I just thought of it. Scott
I'll
Harrison.
have to look that up. Yeah, I think that's
Yeah,
so cool.
absolutely.
Like I'm excited because I mean, obviously this space of like really cool, sexy entrepreneurship is like still kind of new, I think. Like I don't think it was like as like cool back then. Um, so I think it will transition over into the nonprofit space as well. But at the end of the day, I feel like a nonprofit is really mission driven. And while for-profit businesses are trying to be that too, they have a revenue goal to meet. And so at the end of the day, they
Mhm.
have to meet that revenue goal, whereas a nonprofit isn't as tied to that. So you just have conflicting drivers of the business a lot of times. But if there was a way to like merge those to be really similar, that would be awesome. Like if you could.
Yeah, the idea of venture philanthropy, which is creating an organization that is self-sustaining.
Yeah.
I love that, and I would like to do that someday. And talk about creativity to structure a mission-driven organization that is still generating so much revenue, it's self-sustaining.
Yeah.
That is like the ultimate challenge in my mind.
Yeah, that is. I don't think I've ever thought about the rub there between mission and revenue. Cause yeah, that's just a really tough line to play. Even in
It
like
is.
coming from the world of sales, I constantly had to deal with that when I was in recruiting. And it probably made me a bad salesperson at times because I'd be like talking to someone and I knew I could close this candidate for this job, but in my head, I was like, they're going to hate this job. And then I'd just be like, you're going to hate this job. I don't think you should work there. And I'm like, maybe that makes me a bad salesperson, but maybe it makes me a good person. And that's the one I want to be at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's dive into Brightly a little bit because, like you said, I think it fills an incredible niche, and as somebody that actually their business potentially like fits in that, I totally recognize the value that it brings. So you touched on it earlier about kind of how it was the culmination of your career, but like ultimately, what kind of led you to start your own business? Like, we talk about it a lot on here that you kind of have to be crazy. So, what's wrong with you? Why did you want to start your own business?
I I think that this is probably not going to be the answer that other people would give. I kind of have a hot take on entrepreneurship. I think entrepreneurship is oftentimes very like pat yourself on the back and you
Hmm.
like humble brag subtly a lot. Like,
A lot of humble brags. Yes.
yeah, like maybe I'm just weird, but I just always thought that I would be an entrepreneur or something like that. Like, I just
Yeah.
don't want to be that. Um, and so my answer is not going to be cool, but like I saw a need in the market. It aligned with my skill set and I was like, all right, let's do it. I really enjoy what I do. I think it is a big need. I see startups that I experienced this at Will Reed for years. We couldn't figure out and this is just a part of startup life. It's not unique to Will Reed, but we couldn't figure out even just our like visual look or how we described ourselves or anything like that. And we spent just so much money on agencies and consultants and trying to figure this out. And I was like, gosh, there's got to be a better way to do this. And I think there is. I think I just tell people this all the time. I think startup marketing does not need to be complicated. And that's kind of why I wanted to do this. I was like, don't go spend $250,000 on launching your first Webflow site for your brand when you can hire a really, really talented contractor and a marketing consultant like myself and build you one for a fraction of that cost. It doesn't need to be as complicated. And I was seeing people make those decisions left and right, and probably just because they are in a time crunch, they need something quick, and they don't know what's out there. But I just felt passionately about that because I experienced spending that money and not feeling like I got what I was paying for, and then having to change it 2 weeks later because I worked at a startup. So that's why I wanted to start this business. And I once again, not the coolest answer ever. This isn't the business that I would like push up a hill through my dying day. I've been passionate about it my whole life, and now all my dreams have culminated into Brightly. This isn't that. This is my learning business. I'm like, I want to know what's going on. Like, let me talk to people. I want to have conversations with people like yourself. All the founders I've talked to so many founders. I've talked to so many VCs, and I'm like, I am learning so much. And you know what? At the end of the day, this is probably not the business that I will like push until my dying day, but I am learning and getting to do something I love. And that is so special to me. Whereas I feel like a lot of people are just so addicted to this idea of being an entrepreneur and speaking at TechCrunch and being in Forbes that they miss this opportunity to like really to learn from really great people. And sometimes I even kind of miss that. I'm like, I started my own business and now I don't have like a boss pouring into me. And some of my like fondest memories are learning from my managers and leaders at Faith Driven Entrepreneur and learning from my leaders at Will Reed, like Paige. And now I have to look elsewhere for that. And I definitely can. But yeah, that was a long-winded way to basically say, I didn't start this because I wanted to change the world, even though that's what a lot of people might tell you. I started this because I wanted to learn. I wanted to learn and I wanted to do something I love at the same time. And somehow I'm now doing what like my actual dream job, which is so cool. And I'm not just saying that because we're on a podcast. Like I actually love what I do every day.
Yeah, well, that's important because I mean that's what should drive you at the end of the day. I was talking to somebody the other day and we were talking about just the term wealth and what that means, and I think that kind of gets misconstrued in the entrepreneurial community because there are so many billionaires and overnight successes, and everybody's driving Ferraris and stuff like that, and everybody thinks that that's what this is going to be like. But what he brought up was, the person that makes $50,000 a year but gets to spend their money and time the exact way they want it is infinitely wealthier than somebody who makes $500,000 and is miserable and not doing what they love. And, I think that that's really powerful because, it's kind of a matter of perspective. So when you're in a situation where you are doing what you like and it's combined with, your skill set, it's like the perfect culmination of all of this. And I think that that's rare.
Yeah. I think we've really bought into this narrative as a culture that if you beat yourself to death by working insane hours, like you will be fulfilled. And that is just not true, because I don't know hardly anyone who is working 16-hour days and is like, this is the best thing ever. Like the people I know that are entrepreneurs and are living their life have really healthy walls, and honestly I respect them more, and they have a thriving social life and they have thriving relationships with their spouse or kids or family, whatever. And that's the kind of entrepreneurship I want to see. I don't this like frantic, like I'm stressed and I'm drinking coffee at 2 a.m. because I have so much to do. I'm like, why? Also, I'm going to get on a pedestal for a second. Also, why are we pretending like everything we are doing is like so urgent? Like we are following thousands of years of people building and creating things. And yes, we're at the end of technology, but like this sense of like, if I don't do it now, then the world will suffer is like not always true. It's true about some things, but it's not always true. And it just puts yourself in like, it's a really selfish way to think, because you're always going to be cheating someone, right? You working until 2 a.m. is cheating someone. You're not like someone's suffering because you made that decision. Someone's losing out on those hours. It might be just you, but someone is losing out on those hours because you're choosing to work. And there are seasons where you do need to work a lot. And I went through those seasons too. And my husband works crazy hours and I'm so proud of him for it. But all that to say, when the vision becomes more important than like a fulfilled life with the people around you and honestly just still loving your work, that's when entrepreneurship is just sad. That's sad entrepreneurship.
What do you think is the biggest challenge that faces the modern entrepreneur?
Pride. I think pride. I think if you stop listening and stop being kind, then why? Like, why are you even doing it? Why would you dedicate your life to something where at the end of the day, you're not helping anyone? And I don't know. I think, I know this is a side note, but working at Next Coast Ventures, they're such a humble team. They ask so many questions. They're so kind to everyone. And that has honestly been a new experience to me, which is sad in the world of venture capital. And I've met a lot of amazing people in venture capital as well, but just the ethos of their team being like kind and humble is not something you see a lot in the tech scene, because at the end of the day, people just want to talk about themselves and how they're changing the world. And I think the most incredible entrepreneurs are the ones that are thinking about, are genuinely fascinated in other people and how what they're building is impacting other people, not them. And I struggle with this too. This is probably why it's on my mind. I'm like innately prideful and innately selfish.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I constantly have to be asking myself, like, when I'm talking to this person, am I really just trying to talk about me, or am I genuinely fascinated in what they have to say? Am I genuinely open to hearing other people's ideas that might be better than my own? Am I open to saying my original idea was stupid? I'm glad you said that. It was stupid. And I take that criticism well. I think a humble entrepreneur and a humble leader is one of the greatest to work for and can have more impact on people than we could ever imagine. If all entrepreneurs were that way, that would be so cool.
I think it kind of gets overshadowed, but the effects that, somebody, I'm trying to think of the best way to articulate this, but like people that do their job the right way, the entrepreneurs that are humble and set pride aside, like they impact so many more people than they realize, right? In not only, is their business well run and is impactful in that regard, but the people that surround them, kind of like, your upbringing through the entrepreneurial world, you were touched by so many great mentors and leaders, and like that had an effect on you, and they had an effect on their community. And I think that sometimes people forget that their actions run much deeper than just the business.
Yeah, I think like a few weeks ago, I'm working with a company that is like in stealth mode right now. And I was on a call with the co-founders, and they're amazing guys. They're so nice and so funny. And one of them seemed a little bit off, but I didn't really think anything of it. And honestly, some of this is just oblivion. Sometimes I'm just oblivious. My feelings, they don't get hurt very often because I don't know someone's trying to hurt my feelings. And so I got off the call and I was like, oh, he was busy. He just seemed a little off today. Well, a few hours later, I got a message on Slack from him, and it was a long paragraph, and it was like, hey, Megan, I just want to sincerely apologize if I came off like rash in our conversation earlier. It was basically just like a long message that was just the definition of humility. And nobody has ever, and at the end, he asked for my forgiveness, and I've never experienced that, to be totally honest. It was really cool. At the same time, I was kind of sad. I was like, wow, I have never experienced this. I wish I had, but it was really cool because I was like, that's the kind of leader that like in the future, I imagine how much more grace I'm going to have for him. Imagine how much more like respect and like, who am I going to want to fight for down the road? The person that like was humble enough to come to me and ask for an apology. And I'll be honest with you, I cried out of happiness. I told my husband, I was like reading it out loud to Brandon, my husband, and I was like, look what he just said to me. I was like, this is amazing. No one's ever done this. I probably sent him like an overly emotional response back, but I was just like really, really impressed. And I wanted him to know, I was like, that can be life-changing for an employee to receive a message like that. And my previous CEO at Will Reed Page, she often did that. She would schedule meetings with me just to say sorry. And I was like, that is the kind of leader I want to be. Now, do I do that even in my own marriage to my husband? No. So my track record is not awesome. I always want to be the first to say I'm sorry, and I'm always the last. But I like, it sets this incredible bar and this incredible example of like just being willing to say sorry. And that's so countercultural. Like no one does that. And I don't know, if you want to build a different culture for your company, like, wow, you just doing that will be a story that you tell on a podcast. Like that is truly amazing,
Yeah, and like you said, it could change an employee's life, and ultimately at the end of the day, like the biggest investment you would make is going to be in your employees and your team, and
Yeah.
we've we've learned that as we build out our own businesses. Like it's a massive like financial investment, but it's also like a huge cultural investment because this person is going to have a massive impact on other people, and you want to make sure it's the right person to begin with, and that's that's hard to do, and it's a lengthy process, but it's like well worth it, and worth your time, and worth your energy. Megan, the last question that I want to ask is, kind of throughout this entire conversation, we've kind of been building to it, but just simply, why are you an entrepreneur?
Oh gosh. Okay. Why am I an entrepreneur? I mean, I wish I could give you some like really beautiful, well thought out answer, but I think
No, we want it raw and honest and transparent.
I mean, I'm still figuring it out. If my answer is I don't know. I don't know. I don't know why I'm an entrepreneur, but I'm inclined to believe that we're all entrepreneurs in our own way. Aren't we all creatives in our own way? And maybe because I'm doing this in the workplace, I get the official title of entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
But my mom is an entrepreneur. She's a stay-at-home mom, and she is entrepreneuring at home every single day. And my sister, who was a teacher for years, I would consider her an entrepreneur. I think I don't know, maybe it diminishes the term entrepreneur, but I truly think that we're all so creative and we have the capacity to create something that flourishes in this world. And I'm doing mine in corporate America or startup America. And so now I'm an entrepreneur, but um, I think all of us have the capacity and the call and the ability to create something that makes the world a little bit better and moves from chaos to order. And I'm just doing what I was made to do, I think. And I think all of us could do that. I don't think I'm special. I think we're all entrepreneurs in the places that we've been placed, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I love that answer because that I think that culminated nicely, kind of matching your genuineness as a person, and just kind of the way that you've all of your experiences. I think that is the perfect answer to why you're an entrepreneur for you. I think that was perfect. So love that. Megan, thank you so much for coming on today. Where can people learn more about you, more about Brightly? Plug those socials, websites, whatever you got.
Yeah, my website is meetbrightly.com, and it is marketing and venture capital, or marketing for startups and venture capital firms. And you can follow me on Instagram or find me on my personal LinkedIn, which is Megan Lanz.
Beautiful. All right, Megan, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. It's great talking to you, Peyton.